Namaste once again, teachers.
Namaste.
Thanks for having us join this session. So I think I will just take it forward from where Sir left. So this is this question, right? There is this question, do students fear economics? What do your children tell? Do they fear? Or do they love the subject?
They love the subject, ma'am.
They love the subject. So why is it that they love the subject?
Because we are studying about what is happening around our world. We are
So
correlated.
Okay. So they're able to relate.
Yes.
Very much relatable. Okay, fine. Then anything else? But still, when you look around, no, not very many colleges offer BA Economics or MA Economics degrees. Down south, especially, not very many colleges, offer such degrees. Again, not very many areas are there for them to take up economics as a profession, isn't it?
Yes, ma'am.
Have your students reported on this? What do they have to share?
We will have to tell them that economics is the basis of all management subjects. It's like biology for medical science.
That reminds me, sir, I normally draw a tree. Sometimes in the beginning, I used to draw it. See, this is a root. This is what is economics. From this is where, your accountancy,
Yes.
your management, and then all your other theories like
Yes.
branches and, flowers and fruits, they came up. So the very root is what is economics. That is what I used to tell
Yes.
them. So that's exactly what makes it complex to teach and learn. But then, like, nothing like the passion the teacher is going to show in the teaching. The children, they also catch on, and as ma'am said, they start loving it after they understand the basics of the subject. So for econ lover, who can become economics lovers? I was just, as sir was teaching a lot of things, I was able to catch integration of various subjects and of course even other languages. So those who love economics definitely will be intellectually very curious, right? The way our question papers are nowadays, cause and effect, and reflect on this, analyze this, yeah, the competency based questions. So that intellectual curiosity we'll have to probably instill in our students. We'll have to make them ask so many questions, right? And generally we understand that macroeconomics comes very easily to children who have this mathematical aptitude. Some people fear macroeconomics. Even children, they fear macroeconomics. There are teachers who really find teaching macroeconomics very, very difficult. So why is that so? Jayanti ma'am, why is that so? Do you find it easy, difficult? How do your children find it?
Macroeconomics, full and full economics, concept oriented.
Okay.
Understanding enough for that macroeconomics. My children, they are face difficulty in IED because they have to mug up.
Okay, right. Rote learning is what they fear.
Yes,
so maybe they will do macro well. Okay, right.
Ma'am, according to me, I think macroeconomics is something which we can give very live examples, whereas in microeconomics, it is more theory based. So we cannot price determination is fine, ma'am. Price determination we can show with the demand and supply, but other than that, this production and all the law of diminishing returns and all, to some extent we need to explain a lot to make the students understand, whereas in macroeconomics they can find it out in their daily activities. This is what I feel.
Okay. Should there not be a lateral thinking, ma'am? There is a reason with which macroeconomics and Indian economic development are taught together in class 12. They used to be
No,
years
ma'am, I'm
when-
talking about micro. This is my view on microeconomics, ma'am.
on micro.
Micro, yeah, ma'am.
Again,
Yeah.
micro and statistics. I think that
Yes, ma'am.
combination is excellent, right? Same way, Indian economic development and macro. It is that
Yes, ma'am.
combination is really good because that
Yes,
brings out the lateral thinking in the
Yes, ma'am.
students. Whatever
Yes.
they read up in macro, they can clearly apply it in Indian
In the
economic
Indian
development.
economic development. Correct.
And statistics, they can apply it
Apply
in
in
micro.
micro. Yes, ma'am.
Right. So probably that application, if we are going to tell them, we are right from the beginning, if we are going to instill this, analytical and applicative skills, that would help them. So how do we do it? How do we do it? So this is something I read. Yeah. Macro, it's difficult to teach, partly because it involves deeper concept learning. This is exactly what Jayanti ma'am was sharing. She was saying initially macro, it's loaded with concepts, theories. Fine. So we'll have to read, we'll have to understand, and then only it becomes easy for us to take it up in class, right? So, and so many children are there who fear this subject because there needs to be both the application and the theory part merged together, isn't it? Yeah,
Yes,
look at that. The answers,
sir.
they do not leap out from the equations. So one has to dwell on the economic behavior underneath the algebra. I've heard of teachers writing the equation on board and then solving the sums. National income accounting, they say, I have taught them the equation. They will do the sums. That's not taught that way, isn't it? You need to teach them the concepts. You need to make them understand the concepts. Once the concept learning is very thorough, then probably that helps them to apply, right? So that's what I thought I would just, share with you. So how do you get this concept clarity? Concept clarity, of course, through repeated learning, reading, understanding, deep understanding. And when children are able to relate, as ma'am was saying, when they are learning both Indian economic development and macroeconomics together, when they are able to follow what's happening around them really well and relate to it, the learning becomes much better and deeper. The understanding becomes good. And of course, we always do different teaching learning styles, right? I think Sir spoke about experiential learning, how you can, bring out experiential learning, give them activities, make them do it. So learning by doing, that's what they can follow, and through many ways, the concept clarity can be attained. Yeah. So why concept clarity has to be there for class 12? Most importantly, learning Indian economic development, macro, and then micro, whatever it is, all said and done for class 12 children, when it boils down to marks, they'll have to perform in the exam, isn't it? And that performance is one end goal. The journey itself has to be enjoyed. So sir was talking about how the journey can be made enjoyable. Yeah. So the end point also has to be very clearly attained, nicely attained. At the end of the day, that is when all of us are going to be happy. The teachers would be happy, the children will be happy, and that would also take them on to the next step, right? So the concept clarity, the deep understanding, that gives them clear communication skills, the way they're going to write their answers. It becomes solid, good, the way in which they're going to present the answers, present the points, the key points, the value points, whatever you call them. That's going to become very, very clear, right? And it allows the individual to understand the complex scenarios. So now that we have all cause-effect relationship, analytical competency-based questions, they've got to understand the concept. That would help them to come out with creative solutions, isn't it? It's not enough if they understand the theory, how to apply the theory, how to be creative in coming out with good solutions, right? So that is very, very important. those type of questions are on the increase. So overall, that helps them to perform better in academics, and most importantly, that makes them career ready. Not only now, we'll have to only probably instill this kind of creative thinking in them, so that becomes a habit, right? So later on also, in their interviews, they will be ready for competency-based questions, and whether it is entry into college or jobs, that would give them an added edge, a competitive edge, right? Fine. Now, moving on to what we plan to do. I think Sir did start up with budget, BOP and Forex. I
Yes, sir.
meant to do it later on, but since Sir already started, I thought it would be only right if I'm going to continue on with that same, thinking train. Okay, so this is a general structure of the budget. I don't think I'm going to delay on that. This is knowledge all of us have, right? Okay, now revenue expenditure and capital expenditure. Now, how do you introduce these expenditure concepts to your class? Is it through examples? How do you introduce this? What is revenue expenditure? Through examples, if you're going to explain the concept revenue expenditure, how would you do it?
We can give them examples of various type of taxes, ma'am. Yeah.
Revenue
You should
expenditure.
not create any
No, I'm
absurd-
sorry.
Revenue
sorry.
expenditure.
I'm sorry. We
Revenue
can. Yeah. I was telling about receipts actually. We can speak about the various kinds of scholarships provided by the government, old age pension,
Right,
widow pension,
right,
such
Right,
things
so-
we can explain.
right. So this is what I have. I have some examples through which I normally start off, right? So expenditure, why I start off with expenditure? Because that is what is always very high.
Yes,
The
ma'am.
expenditure being very high is what is the major problem, isn't it? Whether it is the revenue expenditure or the total expenditure of the country, when it is going to be very high, then that brings in the problem of deficit, and then you'll have to rack your brain as to how to correct it. And should that be corrected? That's another thing. We will just reserve that to the end. Now,
Yes, ma'am.
getting back to this revenue expenditure, it is an expenditure that does not create any asset. This is what some of you were sharing in the morning. So if the government departments are going to give in pension, salary, and old age pension, all these things, that would be a recurring expenditure for the government, isn't it? So that's very important thing that we'll have to tell them, that all these revenue expenditures, they are recurring in nature. They keep repeating.
Yes.
Yeah, they keep repeating.
Repeating.
Fine. So in the revenue account, when there is going to be a deficit, what is the problem? Is that an indicator of something?
The liabilities on the government front, it's increasing.
Okay, when the revenue expenditure is much higher than the revenue receipt.
Because there is no source from where I can get the income, whereas I am spending. This is what happening.
Okay, so
Okay.
that's a
Yeah.
warning signal to the government, because the government seems to be not able to even handle its regular recurring expenditures, isn't it? The revenue expenditure being much higher than the revenue receipt would mean even for the day-to-day operations, the government does not have enough money, right? So
Yes.
what next then? What should they do? When they don't have enough money for their regular expenditures, like for salary payment or for pension payment or for old age pension giving and all that, what do they do then?
They will take
Start
money
to
from
borrow,
capital account.
We can borrow, ma'am.
borrow as well as our
Yes.
disinvestment, sell.
Right. Okay. So one thing is, yeah, they should try and cut the expenditure, but then that is not possible, obviously, because look at all the categories. It is salary, pension, old age pension, all such examples that we have here. Isn't it? Most of it looks like a necessary.
Social scheme.
Yes, most of them looks like necessary expenditures for the government, right? So one thing is they can increase the revenue. Yeah. One thing is they can increase the revenue. So if they are going to increase the revenue, how will they be able to increase the revenue? Borrowing is the last thing, isn't it, ma'am? All of us
By
are immediately saying borrowing.
increasing
Borrowing.
taxes.
Huh? Increasing
Increasing
taxes. If there is
taxes.
any scope to increase the direct tax or the indirect tax, the government will think of that and will do that, right? At the same time, the government might lose the welfare edge, right? Normally, popular governments, they don't do it. Governments which bother too much about the welfare of the population, also countries like ours, where there isn't much scope to tax a lot, fine? They think about it a lot and then they don't do it, right? So generally, as you people mentioned, the only other way is to end up borrowing. So if there is no scope to increase the taxes, direct and indirect taxes, and increase the revenue thereby, the only way left is to borrow. So when they borrow, what happens then?
They want to repay the borrowed amount. So it will create liability.
Okay, so that increases the liability. So a revenue deficit would mean that there is going to be an increased liability in the future. That is why it is a red mark, right? That's why it is a big, warning to the government saying, okay, hey, here, note, you are exceeding your receipt, you're spending too much. Even for the regular spending, you don't have money, so you end up borrowing. So that means you will have to repay. So repayment of not only the borrowed amount, but also
Interest.
interest. So when more and more interest is going to be there, what will happen then?
Government may be in debt trap, ma'am.
Why will it be in debt trap, sir?
Because for paying that interest, again, they have to borrow from someone else because they're not able to meet their day-to-day expenses. So it will have goes on, ma'am.
What is that interest, sir? What is
Sorry,
that
ma'am?
interest? What is that interest? Under which component do you account for it? See, my tax and non-tax revenue is a revenue receipt,
Yes, ma'am.
isn't it? And my borrowing, it is a capital receipt.
Yes, ma'am.
Fine, right? And interest payment, what is that?
Will be a revenue expenditure, ma'am.
Exactly. So if it's going to be a revenue expenditure, then my expenditure is again high, right?
Yes.
That's why it becomes a vicious cycle. That's exactly why it becomes a vicious. So this is how, you make the children think. All of you are thinking really wonderfully well along with me, right? So that is how it becomes a vicious cycle. You started with the revenue expenditure being very, very high, right? Which led on to some capital receipt, right? But then that capital receipt is going to again lead on to future commitments and some more revenue expenditure. So it becomes a vicious cycle. So how do you break it? How do you break it? Fine. So this is how you can make the children think in this particular area, and slowly the entire implications and the causes and effects and all these things through this kind of thinking, you can explain it, right? Okay. Then moving on to some expenditures. Some expenditures we just saw over here as examples. It cannot be avoided. Salary, pension, old age pension, they are recurring expenditures, right? There are also some planned expenditures and non-planned expenditures. So which are these non-planned expenditures? Why we don't plan for them? Government has to plan everything, right? Why it doesn't plan?
Like that
Unexpected.
COVID vaccines, which have been given by the government.
Yeah,
Free
Jaitha
of
ma'am,
cost.
yes.
COVID vaccines given by the government free of cost.
What is that?
COVID vaccines, ma'am.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, given by the government free of cost.
Okay,
So
that's not
it is
planned, right?
not
Because
planned,
pandemic
unplanned.
suddenly happened
Yeah.
and then that was an expenditure, necessary expenditure. So yeah, you are
So
talking
from
about, yes, contingencies and suddenly it crops up. Yes, the government has
So-
to spend for it. Absolutely.
So
Anything
from
else?
natural calamities, sudden natural
Okay,
calamities, it
yes,
can come
that's
up.
always there. That's always there. But sometimes for that, the contingency fund is there. The government
Okay.
will have some contingency fund. Over and above that, of course, some non-planned expenditure will go for that. Otherwise,
Short term.
yes, otherwise, for the regular short-term recurring expenditures like salary to the staff and pension, interest payment, all these things, the government need not plan.
Yes.
It is a regular one, right? It has to be done and no special planning is required. No big amount is going to go for that and no earmarking, no allocation separately for that. Right now, whatever is planned with the help of the experts for the now the Niti Aayog, earlier on the 5-year plans, right? All that with a special objective for specific developmental work, the amount was set aside, used to be set aside, given to the states, given to the various sectors, production sectors like primary, secondary, and tertiary sectors. So for long-term development. Right, for long-term development, and most probably one time may not recur, some specific one like lake clearing or metro rail project or all such development projects. They'll have to be planned because it's not going to be very small amount of money. It's going to be huge money, lump sum amounts, right? And of course, with resource scarcity, the government has to plan all such expenditures, and that's what it does. So there are some expenditures which are planned and there are some which are not planned, right? So these, I think we will have to tell them along with examples, we'll have to tell them. Only then, while they are going to calculate, they will be able to identify. Nowadays, what the board is giving is probably they are just giving revenue expenditure, capital expenditure, and then probably they are saying this is a revenue receipt, that is a capital receipt. So it becomes easy for you to calculate the deficit. But imagine what if they are going to give you the expenditures just like that. For instance, if they are going to give you metro rail lane in Chennai, right? Funds given for metro rail project in Chennai. Then the
So that is
children will have,
capital expenditure, right?
that's right. That's right. So they will have to immediately understand that it is capital expenditure, and as part of the total expenditure, they've got to add it, isn't it? Yeah, they've got to. So see how they will have to identify the particular component, and then they will have to find out if in the calculation of deficit, where exactly they've got to, whether add it or reduce it or so. Right? So given the examination conditions within the 3 hours, it becomes too much for children. So the answer should be there at their fingertips. For that, a thorough learning is necessary. So if we are going to make them think from the beginning, even as we are teaching them, we are going to give them these small questions here and there, and then make them work it out, then it becomes easy probably in the long run. If we are going to train them differently from the beginning, then it becomes easy for them to handle such queries, right? Okay, right. Then these are some developmental and non-developmental expenditures, right? Today morning also, there was something about defense. So we just see expenditure on defense, police, transfers to households. All these are what type of expenditures? What type of expenditures are these? Expenditure undertaken by the Defense Department, Police Department, teachers, are you there?
Revenue expenditure.
Ma'am, look at the topic there. Is it developmental or non-developmental?
This will be
Non-developmental.
non-developmental
Welfare expenditure.
Non-developmental expenditure.
Yes,
Why do
ma'am.
we say these are non-developmental expenditures?
Because to improve the welfare of the people.
Okay, it's a necessary evil, isn't it? For the
Yes,
safety and security of the country, they have to be undertaken, but they don't generate revenue. They are undertaken so that the population is going to remain safe and secure.
Yes, ma'am.
Fine. Otherwise, they are not revenue generators. If I'm going to, as a government, if I'm going to invest some money in my agriculture, then I get a return. Right? That will be a productive investment. That will be a developmental expenditure. Right? So non-developmental expenditures are all those expenditures which do not provide any direct return. Right? Now, are all defense expenditures revenue expenditures? Let me repeat the question. Are all defense expenditures revenue expenditures?
No, ma'am. No, ma'am.
Why not?
For example, if they are spending expenses for any one weapon, so it is asset of a country. Am I correct?
Sorry, ma'am, come again.
Any vehicle, any
Okay.
gun, if they are investing, it is asset.
Right. Army tankers. Correct, ma'am. You're
Yes,
right.
ma'am.
Absolutely
Yes,
right.
ma'am.
Army tankers. If the defense department is going to buy
Yes, ma'am.
tankers for the army, that
So
becomes a
this time,
capital
all the
expenditure.
defense, yes, ma'am.
Yes. Right. So like that, even as we are teaching, if you are going to give them such, small little queries, probably they will be able to understand the application much better. Right. Okay. Now moving on to the receipts. Receipts, basically we have the tax and the non-tax revenue receipts. Right. Non-tax revenue receipts. How do you introduce this topic, non-tax revenue receipts, to your children? And what are the examples?
Police, they are putting fine on the two-wheelers or in court there. So these are the things which students can understand easily in their day-to-day life.
They are the fines for law breaking, isn't it?
Yes, ma'am. And
Yes.
also fees for getting license or some other fees also they are paying. So fines, fees, these are some things we can.
Right, right. So fine. That's one thing. What are the others? What are the other revenue receipts, non-tax revenue receipts? Jayanti ma'am, Jayita ma'am?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. If we
Yeah.
are running business, the profit is a non-revenue receipts. Profit.
Okay. The profit of the, when we say business, what business are we talking about, ma'am? The government as a production unit, isn't it? The government, we are talking about the central government budget, right? When we are talking about the central government budget, we'll have to have clarity that we are talking about the profit that is made by the government companies or the profit that is made by the departmental undertakings, right? Or the public corporations, all the government-owned production units. If they are going to make profits, if they are going to run at profits, like BHEL,
it will come under,
going to make enough profit, then yes. Yeah. So that would become definitely a revenue receipt. Then
registration fee.
Yes.
If I'm going to register one land.
Yes.
Like,
yes. Right.
And donations, ma'am, grants and donations. If government is receiving some donation from
Okay. Okay. Unilateral transfer. That's unilateral transfer, isn't it? Single-sided transfer or unilateral transfers and investment income, right? Absolutely. And other administrative earnings that the government has, right? As ma'am was saying, the license fee and all these things, right? Then forfeiture. What is this forfeiture? How do you introduce this concept of forfeiture to them? Special assessments. What are they?
It is that suppose I am having a house, a flat, And because of the construction of the metro rail or something, the valuation of that has gone up. So in that case, the taxes which I am supposed to pay, it's much higher than previously, which I used to pay. So this kind of assessment will be coming under this category.
It's called a special assessment because it's a one-time
Yeah.
levy.
Yes,
Right?
ma'am. Yes,
Other
ma'am.
taxes, they are regular, recurring probably, but
Yes.
this is a special assessment because it's going to be a one-time levy. And
Yes, ma'am.
forfeitures are going to be
Assessed regularly? Not sure.
for not complying with some legal procedures and documents, for breaking some agreements and all
Okay.
these things. The court charges a penalization
Okay,
charge.
okay.
So it is that,
Okay.
right? It is
Also-
that charge. Yes, the penalty that the court is going to have on breaking agreements, legal agreements and so on. That is what is a forfeiture, right? So this is how through examples, and some of the textbooks again give it really well, right? I think all of us are following Sandeep Garg only.
Yes, ma'am. Yes,
And
ma'am.
yes, yes. So that textbook I think gives wonderful examples, right? So this is what I thought. I have just lined up few onto my right hand side. Non-debt creating. What are non-debt creating? This word I think we'll have to know. There are two ways in which the capital receipts can be raised. One is through debt creating tools. The other one is non-debt creating tools. So the debt creating tools, they are the
Borrowings.
borrowings. So the government can borrow from the public, from the RBI, from international organizations, from foreign governments, right? Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
So when you're teaching this borrowings from public, what examples do you give? Do you give any specific examples for this? How can
That
government borrow from us?
That Indra Vikas Patra, Kisan Vikas Patra.
Ma'am, is that a borrowing? Those are all small
Ma'am,
savings.
any PSU selling shares of PSU selling shares to the general public, and if the public they are purchasing the share, means it is a form of borrowing for the PSU, which will be interacted in later phase.
Okay,
Indra
that's one
Vikas
example.
Patra, Kisan Vikas Patra.
Ma'am, Jayanti ma'am, Kisan Vikas Patra, all these things, they are part of the savings, small savings.
ma'am.
We are
Yes,
going to
ma'am.
save. So that's a non-debt creating activity.
Oh, yes,
Right.
ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, we save
Fine.
with the government, and the government gives us these certificates on maturity of the time period. We are going to receive the amount. So that is a form of, the public
Non-creating.
saving with the government. They are non-debt creating, right? Yeah.
Yes,
Fine.
ma'am.
Right. What about, I was asking you about borrowings from the public, right? So ma'am was talking about shares, selling of shares. Any other manner in which the government
Very-
can borrow from the public?
Very different types of bonds, ma'am, or securities.
Exactly.
Yes,
So
ma'am.
our open market operation from the bank lesson, right? We can bring it in
Okay.
here, the open market operation,
Operation.
where the government bonds
Yes,
and
ma'am.
securities are going to be sold to the public, right? Through the RBI, right? So that can be used as an example. So they should know the alternates. So why am I trying to, link these chapters? Because at any minute, the terminology might change in the numerical that is going to be given to the children. The government might not say debt creating. Okay, it might just say sale of government bonds. So the children should be able to immediately find out, okay, fine, this is a capital receipt, and accordingly they will have to add it to the total receipts, isn't it? So the children should be aware of the alternate vocabulary, right? Okay, then recovery of loan. What is this recovery of loan? Now, under non-debt creating category, recovery of loan is given as an example. What is that recovery of loan? To whom will the central government give loan and where will they recover it from?
It will give to state government,
governments.
state government, some local government.
Absolutely. To the
Yes,
local
ma'am.
self-government and to the state government, to the union territories.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
So since we're talking about the central government budget, there is very much a possibility of the central government extending such loans to the state governments, union territories, and so on. So when they recover it back, right? When they recover it back, that would be creating receipts, capital receipts for the central government. Isn't it? Disinvestment
ma'am.
is a example given along with the definition itself. Selling of shares of the public sector
Public sector.
organization. Right. Okay. So that would be Jaita ma'am. This is why I asked you. See, you
Ma'am.
you
Yes,
spoke
ma'am.
about selling of shares,
Yes,
disinvestment.
ma'am.
What is it?
Yes, ma'am.
It's non-debt
Di-
creating, isn't it?
Okay. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
It actually reduces the
Liability,
asset.
asset. Yes, ma'am.
It reduces the asset of the
Asset.
government. It does not create any liability for the
Yes, ma'am.
government. Right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
And then the small savings, like the post office and all these things. Like what ma'am was, you're talking about NSC, KVP, right? Savings of the senior citizens with the post offices. Also, this recent program has come up for young girls. The parents can save up, which is called as a Sukanya Samriddhi Yojana, right? All such is the small saving. Now, why all this is included? Why all this is included? Will it make a difference? They look like very small programs. Any idea why they are all in, spoken so much about? This is where you link it up to Indian economic development teachers. This is where you're going to tell them we have a
Human
huge,
welfare.
no, this is where we have a huge rural population, isn't it? So
Rural development.
from the rural population, so much of small saving, number of banks are very less in the rural areas, whereas the number of post offices are going to be very many, isn't it? The reach
Yes.
through the post office is amazing. So many post offices are there in the rural areas. So to mobilize small savings from all these areas was one major drive that was taken up by the government, right? So one side, the idea of encouraging thrift among the population. The other side, of course, it becomes the receipt to the government. Government will get the money and you make the population also to save. Fine. Right. So that's
Yes.
how you slowly integrate Indian economic development and also macroeconomics, even without their knowledge. Right. As examples, we can try and do that. Then, of course, later on, we can go on and discuss it later in the other chapter. That will be a good recollection for them. So while you're teaching rural development, then you will say, come on, man, this is what you have read in macro, isn't it? So that will
Yes,
become a
ma'am.
reiteration for them. Okay, so now moving on to the budgetary deficits. Tell me whether deficits are always bad. Are deficits always bad?
No, ma'am.
Why not, ma'am?
Morning we spoke and we discussed, deficit budget only. It will helpful for economic growth because
Okay,
we have to
okay.
increase our revenue.
Yes. So for developing countries, deficits are good. That's an indication that the government is spending for the population. So that means, they are there in the growth process, development process. So very good, right? What would a surplus budget mean? What would a surplus budget mean?
Revenue exceeds the expenditure is known as surplus budget.
Okay, what would it mean? What would it imply? What would it imply?
Government earning more than spending.
Government is not spending enough. It could mean that.
Yes. Yes.
Or on the contrary,
Government is taking more from the people, not giving much to the people.
Exactly. It's raising more revenue from the population, taxing a lot. Because all of us know that tax income is a major income for most of the governments, right? Probably it'll very quickly become an unpopular government where it is going to tax a lot, right? It would mean that the tax revenue is much, much higher compared to that of the expenditure, right? Okay.
Yes, yes.
Right. So for what sort of economies surplus budget would be there? Do economies prefer a surplus budget?
Developed economy.
Really, ma'am? I don't think any government would, as I said, if there is going to be a popularity contest, right? So always there is not enough. There is at all the levels, there is scarcity.
Yes,
right? I don't think any government would go in for a surplus budget.
yes.
Right. Okay. So just, I think all of us know what a revenue deficit, fiscal deficit, and a primary deficit is, isn't
Yes,
it?
sir. Yes, sir.
What's a revenue deficit?
Total revenue.
Revenue deficit.
Total expenditure minus total revenue.
Revenue deficit.
Total revenue expenditure minus total revenue receipts.
Okay, the excess of revenue expenditure over the revenue
Total
receipts.
revenue
What is
receipts.
revenue deficit? Right. Okay. When do we normally calculate fiscal deficit? And when do we assume that it is equal to borrowings? Do we always calculate fiscal deficit? Sometimes we assume that it is equal to borrowings, isn't it?
Yes, sir.
So when do we calculate it and when do we assume it to be equal to borrowings, and what are the various alternate ways to calculate it?
So first, why we are getting borrowing? The expenditure, total expenditure is more than the total receipt. So it is known as fiscal deficit. If the expenditure exceeds means we can go borrowing. So fiscal deficit is known as borrowing. Am I correct, ma'am? What?
Okay, to fund the excess expenditure, a nation borrows.
Yes, ma'am.
So the fiscal deficit should be ideally equal to borrowings. Right. When do we calculate? That's my query. Do we always assume fiscal deficit is equal to borrowings? I'm giving you some items, okay? Some expenditure heads and revenue heads and so on. When I'm asking you, when you will assume that when borrowings is given, you simply take borrowings as fiscal deficit.
Yes,
Ma'am, we have to add, we have to just see whether my revenue expenditure is equal to my revenue receipt. Secondly, we have also to see whether our capital expenditure is equal to capital receipt. Now, the total expenditure and the total receipt, if it is not matching, there must be a gap. That is, total expenditure is more than the total receipt. So in order to bridge up that gap, we need to borrow something. So that is how we are borrowing. So which is fiscal deficit.
Any other way of quickly identifying? The children anyway have to sit and calculate. No, the way you're saying, they will have to sit and calculate, isn't it? So you're talking about when they're going to calculate. They cannot assume then, right?
Ma'am, if borrowings is not given in the problem, children have to calculate. If it is given in the problem, they can just take borrowing and write it as fiscal deficit. In case it is not given, they have to calculate the total expenditure and they have to calculate total receipts excluding borrowing. So
Yes.
then the difference can be found out.
Any other way? Any other way?
Primary deficit minus interest payment.
Yeah.
No, ma'am, my query is, when do they calculate the fiscal deficit and when
Yes,
do they
ma'am.
simply
When,
assume
yes,
that fiscal deficit equal to borrowings?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. See, this is what it is. Over here, we see that tax revenue, capital receipt, non-tax revenue, borrowings, revenue expenditure, interest payments. All
Yes,
these
ma'am.
items are given. You're supposed to calculate the revenue deficit, fiscal deficit, and primary deficit,
Yes, ma'am.
right? So here, what would you do?
First, we should act tax revenue, non-tax revenue, which
Okay.
will come under revenue receipt.
Okay.
Then
So item number
capital
1
receipt
plus item number
number
3, which is
3.
47,000 plus 10,000 will be 57,000. That will be the
Revenue receipt.
revenue receipt.
Revenue. We are
Yeah,
going to
then-
subtract the revenue expenditure from the revenue receipt.
Okay.
So
So,
we can get revenue deficit.
okay. Then fiscal deficit.
Fiscal deficit is equal to total revenue expenditure minus total revenue receipts,
Excluding borrowings.
Yeah, as
excluding
borrowing.
borrowing. So we can calculate both the revenue receipts plus capital receipts.
Okay, right. If you closely observe this sum, you will understand that one particular thing is not given. What is not given? For you to arrive at that total expenditure, there is something missing.
Yes, ma'am.
What is missing?
Capital expenditure.
That's it. So
Yes.
when all the components are not given, right? For you to calculate the total receipt and the total expenditure, but then borrowings is going to be given there. Straight away, you are going to take up borrowings and assume that to be equal to fiscal deficit, right? So given these items, you cannot arrive at total expenditure, right? Only revenue expenditure is given there. The
Yes, ma'am.
capital expenditure is not given,
Yes, ma'am.
correct? So directly you can take up borrowings and assume that very clearly to be equal to fiscal deficit,
Yes, ma'am.
right? Then of course, to calculate primary deficit is going to be very easy. Primary deficit will be
Fiscal deficit minus interest payment.
yes. So borrowings is given as 32,000 and the interest payments is also given there. So borrowings less interest payments will give you the primary deficit. So
Yes,
that
ma'am.
is how it is calculated. So
Yes,
that's the
ma'am. Thank you.
amount. Yeah, right,
Yes, ma'am.
right. Okay. What are the alternate methods to calculate the total expenditure? Total expenditure, what does it compose of, teachers? The terminologies which we were talking about just now. Expenditures, how would we break them up?
Revenue expenditure plus capital expenditure is equal to total expenditure.
Fine, ma'am. That's okay. Fine. If they are going to give it as revenue expenditure and capital expenditure, fantastic. Simply we can add up both together and write, wow, very good. We can do that. But what if they give us the finer components? What could be the finer components there? Right? So, see, this is what we have. It could be the, what is borrowing? That's going to be debt creating.
Yes,
Right?
ma'am.
So even in our definition, it is going to be the total expenditure minus the total revenue, which are non-debt creating in nature. So the
Yes.
total revenue, which are non-debt creating, can we split it up as, can we split it up like this? What can we split up? How can we split it up? I'm asking you for the split up. Expenditures and the revenue. What are the different kinds of expenditures, teachers? I think we began the session looking into all those only.
Revenue
salaries,
expenditure,
payment
capital
of pension, payment of old age,
Planned,
pensions, all those
non-planned.
things we'll have to, yeah, all
Yes,
planned and
ma'am.
non.
Planned
Yes, yes.
expenditure, yes, ma'am.
Exactly.
Sorry, ma'am.
Non-planned
Yes.
expenditure.
Planned expenditure, non-planned
Yes.
expenditure, developmental
Development
expenditure,
expenditure.
non-development.
Yeah, this is how we get it nowadays, isn't it? The
Yes,
sums,
ma'am.
they come like this. Plan expenditure, non-plan expenditure, then they may give developmental expenditure, non-developmental expenditure, and so on. And then specifically, they may say non-developmental capital expenditure, developmental capital expenditure, like that. The much finer components are also given there,
Yes,
right?
ma'am.
So we should be aware of even those,
Yes, ma'am.
right? Okay, fine. Yeah, see, some such example I have here. So this would be calculation of revenue deficit. So that can be done directly. Item number 2 minus item number 4. That is the revenue expenditure minus the revenue receipt will give us the revenue deficit,
Yes, ma'am.
right? So
Yes,
if you
ma'am.
want to calculate the fiscal deficit,
Total revenue expenditure minus.
mhm,
So revenue expenditure plus planned expenditure.
mhm. Plus a non-planned capital expenditure, then what else is there?
We are going to add first
Think of
three
total income.
minus.
Expense, net expense.
We'll have to first identify which are the revenue heads and which are the expenditure heads, isn't it?
Yes, ma'am.
Right? A revenue receipt, that is a receipt, right? And
Yes,
then
ma'am.
capital receipts, net of borrowings,
Yes,
right?
ma'am.
So item number 4 and 5, these are the receipts,
Receipts.
right? Okay. Then what are the expenditures? They are very clearly
1, 2,
Revenue
3.
1,
expenditures.
2, and 3. So
Yes,
add
ma'am.
up all those, add up all, just the terminologies are slightly different, that's all. Plan expenditure, revenue expenditure, non-plan expenditure, add it up.
That
So
only
that
when
will-
revenue expenditure minus revenue income. Sorry, total expenditure. Total
We are going to
expenditure.
1, 2, 3. Add 1, 2,
Yes,
3.
1, 2, 3. That is planned revenue and non-planned expenditure
Mhm.
minus revenue receipts and
Capital receipts.
capital receipts. Yes.
Right, right.
Yes.
So that's exactly when the children get into a trouble, when we are going to give them the, just the main headings and then probably give them the definition or just the equation and ask them to calculate, right? So give
Yes,
them
ma'am.
the concepts, give them the examples, let them identify and then clearly move on to the calculation. Fine. So this is precisely what you people were telling. Plan capital expenditure plus the non-planned capital expenditure plus the revenue expenditure will make up the total expenditure head. All the expenditures piled up together minus revenue receipt plus the capital receipts of the nation, right? And look at that, they are saying net of borrowing. What does that word net of borrowing mean? Capital
Ex-
receipts net of borrowing means
Excluding, ma'am.
excluding,
Including.
right? Excluding borrowing, right? So very clearly the formula is there, isn't it? The
Yeah.
formula is very much there. Total expenditure less the
Total
total
receipts
receipt
excluding borrowings.
excluding borrowing. So that's the alternate vocabulary once more, right? So teach the children these things also so that it becomes really easy for them to do it. Okay, so this is time for a small activity. I'll just give you 5 minutes. Let us together check it out. Maybe if you have a small paper and pencil nearby, quickly scratch down the answers for this. I'll give you 5 minutes. Then we will discuss the answers.
First one is capital expenditure. ma'am.
Okay, ready, ma'am? First one
Yes.
is
Capital expenditure.
purchase of army tankers, capital expenditure, totally, because
Create asset. Yes, ma'am.
yes, it creates assets.
Asset.
Absolutely right. Second
Payment
one,
of salary to cover government
Revenue
employees.
expenditure.
Revenue expenditure.
revenue expenditure. Yes, teachers. Interest on debt.
Interest on debt. Revenue receipt.
Revenue,
Interest on debt.
Revenue
receipts.
expenditure.
Interest on debt. Who is going to take the debt?
The government has taken it.
Revenue
and it's
expenditure,
very-
yes, revenue
Revenue
expenditure. So,
expenditure. Yeah.
yes, for the debt, the government has to pay the interest, isn't it, to the public? So
Yes,
that
ma'am.
becomes a revenue expenditure.
Yes.
Absolutely. Then, right. So number 4, sale of green bonds to the public.
Capital receipts.
Capital
Capital
receipts. What are these
Yes,
green bonds?
Environmental related to something.
Yeah. Yes.
I
For
don't know,
sustain-
ma'am. It's just a wild guess.
It's a government bond for sustainable development, right?
Okay, okay, ma'am.
Recently, last year it became a big, investment for the public.
Okay,
The government sold these bonds to the public, green
Okay.
bonds,
okay, ma'am.
right? For sustainable. Some years back, it was infrastructure bond.
Okay.
Government sold infrastructure bond because see, the government also has to raise enough
Raise
money for
money.
spending it back on population, isn't it?
Okay,
So to invest on infrastructural development, they floated infrastructure bonds. And now for sustainable development, they have started floating green bonds,
okay, ma'am.
right? Okay, so yeah, it is going to be capital receipt. Yes.
So this one is only for that, ma'am, garbages and all for, I think they will be doing or planting trees. Is this so? Yeah, they are utilizing this fund for this purpose, planting trees, that is afforestation or this garbage as a waste.
Anything related to sustainable development, ma'am. Anything
Okay.
related to sustainable development. See, for instance, the government is even giving for solar projects, for solar power panels to be set up on households and firms. The government is giving the households as well as the firms subsidy.
Okay,
So
ma'am.
where will they go for money? Right?
Okay,
So they have
okay.
to raise such bonds and get the receipt and then spend it back on such purposes, isn't it?
Okay, ma'am.
So sale of green bonds to the public, that will eventually give receipt to the government, and that will be a capital
receipts.
receipt.
Capital receipts.
Capital receipt, yes.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Senior citizen savings scheme in post office, capital receipts.
okay. It's a small savings,
Small
yes,
savings.
yes. Repayment of loan.
Capital expenditure.
Yes. Auction of seized and surplus property.
Revenue receipts.
Yes. It's a revenue receipt. I think I've got it here. Replacement of bulbs in the
Capital
street
expenditure.
lights.
Capital expenditure.
Replacement of bulbs in the street. Why, ma'am? Capital. It's a recurring expenditure, right?
Yeah,
Okay, okay, okay.
Revenue.
revenue expenditure.
Revenue expenditure.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Introduction of Vande Bharat trains.
Capital expenditure.
Capital
Capital expenditure, because that's a huge expenditure that's going to be involved out there. And it's an asset for the departmental undertaking, right? Solar panel subsidy.
Subsidy is a bad burden to the
Expenditure, man, revenue expenditure.
Revenue
Revenue
expenditure.
It's a
Revenue
revenue
expenditure.
expenditure. It's a subsidy, right? One time,
Subsidy,
Yes, ma'am.
right? Dividends declared by IOCL to shareholders.
Capital expenditure.
Capital expenditure. Income.
Why, ma'am?
Dividend, it is a profit of shareholders.
Yes, correct. So
Revenue expenditure.
revenue expenditure.
Revenue
isn't it?
receipts. Revenue receipts.
No, 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 no.
Paid to them,
Given to the
shareholders.
shareholders. You and me,
Government
when
is
we are
giving.
going to buy
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
IOCL shares, we become shareholders.
Yes,
And part of the profit of IOC bill, we will get it, correct?
yes,
So
ma'am.
when the government is going to give it to us, it becomes revenue expenditure.
Yes, ma'am. Sorry, ma'am.
Profit made by IOCL, which the government is going to take, that would be a receipt for them. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
That portion of the dividend or the profit that is going to go to the government will be revenue receipt for them. But some portion of the profit they will have to give to the shareholders, correct?
Yes, yes, ma'am.
So that will be a revenue expenditure.
Revenue expenditure.
Yes.
Last one is income tax revenue receipts.
Yes. See, even for us, when we don't have the, stress of exam, we are
Yes,
thinking
ma'am.
so much, isn't it? So what if such terminologies are going to be made use of in the exam tomorrow? We never know, because, these are areas, new areas of testing. I think national income accounting and all, they have done too much of testing. There is not much of many new areas to be tested. So probably it's just my guess. Probably these are areas where the complexity in testing might increase, or the competency-based questions might increase. I think the last few chapters in macro, slowly, I think the weightage will increase here, and also the testing might become more rigorous here. So just we'll have to get ready for these.
Yes,
So
ma'am.
yeah, so was that fun?
Yes,
So
ma'am.
together we were able to think a little bit.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so this is, so any other area where you use your expert guidance to teach the children when it comes to deficits? Can you share your experiences? When you teach deficit, these sums, what do your children feel? Are they okay with it? Are they able to immediately crack it? Do they have any problem areas? They don't have any problem areas? What do I gather, teachers? Where do they find the concept to be difficult? Where they're not able to apply? Can you share your experiences? Yeah, Jayanti ma'am.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Wait.
Jayita ma'am.
They find problem only.
Yours was a CBSE school earlier.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so you also probably would have had experience teaching all these areas, right?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Where do children find it difficult?
I'm confused with this capital receipt, and then they, if it is a flat sum, they will do it, ma'am. If it is somehow little twisted, they find it difficult only.
Okay,
If,
okay,
Mm.
right. Okay, yeah. KK sir, what is your experience in teaching such concepts, sir?
Ma'am, actually, if we give revenue expenditure, capital expenditure and all directly, they will find it easy to do. But if various components are given, identifying the
ma'am.
components,
Mhm.
then
That now
categorizing
only I came
them.
to planned expenditure, development expenditure.
So there the children will find little bit difficult actually.
Okay,
But with the
okay.
constant practice, we can make them do it actually.
Yes, I think we'll have, that's why I'm sharing it with you, sir, because I have this feeling that from now on these areas they will start testing it more.
Yeah.
Even in this board examination, not very many questions were there in national income accounting, isn't it?
Yes, ma'am.
Though this is a very small chapter, I
Yeah,
think from
probably.
this particular chapter the questions were there, application oriented questions were there, and I think it was a bit confusing for children.
We
Yes,
can
ma'am.
give more
Yes, ma'am.
assignments and homework, ma'am, in this area. So with the constant practice, that skill will come, how to identify and all those things.
That's right. That's right. So maybe, you need to expose them to different vocabulary, give them a lot of examples. See, for instance, this item number 4. It's something new that I read up that came up to my mind. So I just put it there. And see, these are things that we keep reading in newspapers, introduction of Vande Bharat. The children keep reading it, we discuss it. So, in the flow, simply, hey, Vande Bharat, what is that going to be? Come on, what do you see that as? Right? So immediately children will say more number of trains, that, this. So make them think, that extra bit of thinking along with the concepts, then you slowly lead them on to this.
Yes.
Right. As Sir said, maybe that thinking, that relatability should come all the time
Yes, ma'am.
with practice. Okay, so just tell me the small difference between balance of payment and budget. Are they the same?
Budget is the estimate
Mm-hmm.
and balance of payment is actually what has happened.
Okay, absolutely. Yes, ma'am. That's one very valid point. While the government budget is going to be the proposed revenue heads and the expenditures for a particular fiscal year or financial year, right? A balance of payment is, you know, a statement of all the economic transactions that is going to happen. Yes. Then,
Export and import.
sorry.
Budget is connected with the,
Transactions in budget, we deal with basically deal with domestic currency, whereas in balance of payment, we have an impact of foreign currency also.
Very true, very true. So when we say government budget, we are only talking about the domestic territory, the economic transactions that is going to take place spearheaded by the government, the various revenue heads and expenditure heads of the government. So very specifically for class 12, we have only the central government budget. So the various revenue heads and the expenditure heads for the central government, right, of the country, right? Whereas balance of payment will be
Transactions of both, that is export and import.
not only export and import, it's going to be all types of inflows and outflows that are going
Yes,
to
Yes,
be
of
accounted
inflows and
foreign
for
outflows.
exchange.
as part of the economic transaction, isn't it? Export and import is one small part, very small part,
Yes, yes, yes.
right? Balance of trade, one small part, right? Yeah, see, this is what I have. Absolutely what you people told me. While budget, central budget is going to be pertaining to the domestic territory, balance of payment will be pertaining to the rest of the world also. And in central budget or the government budget, we talk about only the domestic currency circulation in terms of receipts and expenditures. Whereas balance of payment, it will be all the inflows and outflows of foreign currency that will be accounted for, right? And the very first point that Jaitama was pointing out, while budget is a proposal for the upcoming session, BOP is the actual
Actual state.
inflow and outflow statement for the present year, right? Absolutely, teachers. That was lovely. Okay. So here again, these are the small areas. How do you introduce this? How do you introduce this balance of payment chapter? After we teach budget and immediately we move on to balance of payment, the children always get confused with some concepts. What are those concepts? That's precisely why, you know, like that made me ask this question. Is there a difference between government budget and BOP, right? Because here also there is a receipt, there also there is a receipt, here also there is an expenditure, there also there is an expenditure. Children, when they learn fast, they get muddled up, don't they? Have you seen that? Especially during revision exams or pre-board exams, when we are going to test them, they will not be able to identify, you know, whether it's a budgetary item or a balance of payment item, what it is, they will not know. Have you encountered such problems? How do you, yes? Where is the confusion normally? Is there a confusion? What are the components of current account?
Balance of export of goods Export of services, unilateral.
Visible items, invisible
Visible,
items,
invisible.
unilateral transactions.
Unilateral transfer.
Yes, visible account, invisible account, unilateral account,
Unilateral transactions.
and then the factor income account.
Yeah.
Isn't it investment income or the factor income account? So simply when they see these terminologies like rent, interest, profit, right? And
Yes.
gift, grant, all these things, same concepts were there in
Budget also.
budget lesson also, isn't it? Just
Yes,
go by
ma'am.
the examples, you look into the names and, you get into the shoes of your children, then you will understand, oh, everywhere it's the same term. Rent, interest, profit, same thing came in National Income Accounting chapter also, budget chapter also, here also. How do we know which chapter, ma'am, tell me which chapter it is. Sometimes I get queries like that. Yeah. So how do we sort out this problem? What do you people do? What do you people do? Yeah. No, you've never encountered such a problem. Is my problem unique? No, teachers? No. Okay. Right. So just one more small activity I have. Yeah, we'll move on to that. Okay. So look at this one. In which sub account and on which side of the balance of payment account will the following transactions be recorded? Yeah. Remittance from abroad.
From abroad.
Current account. Ma'am.
Current account. Yes. This will be
Credit.
credited.
Remittance. Yeah.
Credited
Credited,
in the
credited.
current account. Yes. Import of computers.
Debit side of current account.
Current account.
Yes. Debit side, because you have to tell them very clearly that when importing is happening, there is going to be payment, right? So money is going to be flowing out of the country. So that has to be debited. Debit in the current account. Sale of shares of Reliance to the US.
Capital account. Debit side of capital account.
Okay, reason, ma'am. If I'm going to ask you for the reason for accounting it like that.
Shares, bond, debentures, borrowing, everything, it will come under capital account.
Yes.
Sale of shares of Reliance to US.
Uh-huh. So,
Oh, we are selling, so income is so credit side of capital account. I'm
yeah.
sorry.
It's a
Yes.
capital transfer.
Because money is getting into this one.
Yes. There will be an inflow when there is going to
Yes,
be
ma'am,
sale
inflow.
of shares.
Yes,
There will be an inflow of money. So that will be credited to the which
yes,
account?
credit of capital account.
Yes. Repayment of loan to IMF.
Debit side of capital account.
Okay. Right. Dividend paid to Google USA.
Debit side of capital account.
Capital account.
Money is going to flow out.
Dividend paid to US Google. So we are giving the money.
Right. That's right. Retained earnings of Reliance in Germany. Under which sub account also you need to say. Retained earnings of Reliance in Germany.
Credit side in the capital account. The current account. Capital account. Credit side in capital account.
Why will it be credits capital account? Why, ma'am?
Retained earning of Reliance.
Retained earning will be part of the
Part of profit.
Right? So
Yes,
retained earning of Reliance in Germany. It has to Reliance. It's an Indian company, right?
Yes,
From
ma'am.
Germany,
So will be there. So it
this
will
has
be
to
in
come back to India, right?
Credit.
So this would be factor income earned from abroad, isn't it? So this will be
credit side
credit side of
Yes,
the
Current account.
current
Current
account.
account.
Absolutely, current account. Yes,
Yes,
then
ma'am.
interest paid to Deutsche Bank.
Debit side.
Debit side of
Current accounts.
Capital,
current account.
current account,
Current
interest,
account, current
interest,
account, interest.
current account.
Yes.
Current account.
Indemnity received from Russia.
Credit side of current account.
Credit side from
Current account.
current account. Okay, what is this indemnity?
Some grants, loan, it's
Yeah,
like
it
that.
can be even a
Payment
war
for some-
indemnity or any kind of
Yes, ma'am.
compensation
Yes.
or some kind of a grant that is going to be given, right?
So we are not going to repay it back.
Yes, yes. So it would be a transfer, a unilateral transfer that is going to be received. Yes, so
Current account,
credit in the
side.
current account, absolutely. Export of software services.
Current account, credit side.
Yes, whether it's going to be a product or a service, as long as it's going to be exported, it is there in your current
Current
account,
account.
right?
Side.
So this will be invisible account of your current account where there would be a receipt, so inflow, credited, right?
Yes.
Export of potatoes to Colombia.
Current account, capital.
Credit,
Uh,
credit.
Credit side.
This will be, yeah,
BOT, balance of trade.
yes, balance of trade or visible account is the correct answer, isn't it? Balance of trade, because potatoes, that is software service. This is potatoes, right? So look into even the minute, nowadays they're looking into the minute terms also, right? So this would be part of the balance of trade, or it would be the tangibles, right? Tangible account, right? Or the visible account. These are other names. Grants given to Sri Lanka.
Debit side, current
Debit
account.
side of current account.
Yes, so this is going to be again a unilateral transfer account
Yes,
under
ma'am.
your current account, right? And money is going to flow out, so debit, right? And then use of official foreign exchange reserve.
Foreign exchange reserve, capital account,
Hmm.
use of official foreign exchange.
If we are
reserve.
taking, it has to be credited, ma'am.
Yes. So this is exactly one another area where we will have to
Yeah.
teach the foreign exchange chapter and this both together. What item actually this is?
Ma'am, can you please explain 12th number once?
Yes, it's an accommodating item, right?
ma'am.
So RBI normally has all kinds of reserves. It has
Yes.
got the domestic currency reserve, the gold reserve, the foreign exchange reserve, which is meant to be kept as the official reserve. The government gives the power to the RBI to hold this foreign exchange reserve, right? Which is the official reserve. Whenever there is going to be a deficit, whenever there is going to be a deficit in the budget, right? What happens? This would be made use of, right? Okay, here we are talking about balance of payment, isn't it?
Yes,
So,
ma'am.
yeah, sorry, see, for a minute, even I got sidetracked. So whenever there is going to be a deficit in the balance of payment, whenever there is going to be a deficit in the balance of payment, it has to be balanced, right?
Yes.
So there would be official reserve usage, or money will be taken out from the RBI's official reserve. So money will be flowing from the RBI official reserve into the balance of payment account. So that would be treated as a positive item
Credit.
or a credit item.
Credited.
Yes.
Yes, so usage of official foreign exchange reserve will be an accommodating item which will bring about a balance in the balance of payment. This will happen when there is going to be a deficit. When there is going to be a surplus in the balance of payment, what will happen then?
Then debit side it will go.
Sorry?
Debit side of capital account.
No, I'm asking you this question. When the balance of payment, right, is going to show a surplus.
Okay, so we can give it to the foreign, is it so? No.
Sorry?
We can give loans to other countries. We can keep it in the reserve
Yes, yes. So when there is going to be a surplus there in the balance of payment, one option, as sir is saying, is the country will become a lender. The country will have a lot of surpluses, a lot of excesses, so it will lend to rest of the world. That's one very good thing. Otherwise, for contingencies in future, right, the nation will keep it as a reserve. So from the balance of payment account, some money will be flowing out into this RBI's reserve. Yes. Okay. So that will be treated as a debit in the
Debit, capital account.
capital account. Absolutely. Fine.